When most of us hear the word yoga, what pops into your head? It's probably a physical pose, right? Maybe some complex stretch? But what if I told you that's just the tip of the iceberg? Today, we're going to dive deep into the philosophical heart of yoga. We're going to explore a tradition that's way less about exercise and much more about transforming your entire way of being.
Okay, so to really get yoga, you have to understand the soil where it grew. This powerful statement right here is from the great philosopher Swami Vivekananda. See, after spending years abroad, this is how he felt the moment he set foot back on Indian soil. It really speaks to this belief in a deep spiritual energy that's unique to the land itself, the very ground from which yoga burst forth.
And this wasn't just, a feeling he had. Ancient texts like the Vishnu Purana actually describe India as Jnana Bhumi, which means the land of knowledge. This is the cultural and spiritual ground that gave birth to some of the world's most profound philosophies. And yeah, that includes the one we're digging into today, yoga. So let's just get right to it. What is yoga, really, if it's not just a workout? To figure that out, we've got to compare our modern idea of it with what it originally classically meant. This slide really says it all. Over on the left, you've got the common view. Yoga is physical exercise, simple enough. But look at the right. That's the classical definition from the sage Patanjali. For him, yoga is a discipline to calm the constant waves, those fluctuations of the mind. The word yoga itself gives us huge clues. It actually comes from two ancient Sanskrit roots. The first one, yujur samyoge, means to unite. We're talking about the union of your individual self with the big universal consciousness. And the second, yuj samadho, means to achieve samadhi, or a state of just perfect mental stillness. See, both point to a really deep internal process. Swami Vivekananda had this brilliant way of explaining it. He said, think of your mind like a lake. When it's all choppy, disturbed by the winds of thought and emotion, the water gets murky, right? You can't see what's at the bottom. But when the wind stops and the water becomes perfectly still, you can see all the way to the lake bed with absolute clarity. That stillness, that is the goal of yoga. And look, this whole idea isn't some modern New Age invention. Not at all. To really appreciate how deep it is, we've got to look at its roots, which go back thousands and thousands of years. The very first hints of yoga show up in the Vedas, the most ancient Hindu scriptures. From there, it was explored in over 20 different Upanishads. It was discussed in the great epics. It was just a widespread part of spiritual life. So the sage Patanjali, who people often call the father of yoga, he didn't actually invent it. What he did around 200 BCE was incredibly important. He gathered up all these ancient teachings and organized them. He systematized them into 195 short, powerful sayings or sutras. So here's the key takeaway. Yoga was never, ever meant to be just a half-hour activity you squeeze in before work. It's a complete lifestyle, a whole way of living and being, designed to guide a person from the day they're born until the day they die. Okay, so if it's a lifestyle, how do you live it? Well, the most famous path is called Ashtanga Yoga, or the 8-limb yoga. And this isn't just a random checklist. It is a structured, step-by-step system for total personal transformation. These 8 limbs are neatly grouped into 4 stages that build right on top of each other to develop your entire personality. You start with your moral character, then you move to your physical body. After that, your psychological mind, and finally, your spiritual self. It's a totally holistic process of purification and finding harmony. Now, did you notice what comes first? It's not the postures, the asanas. The entire foundation, the whole bedrock of the yogic path, rests on Yama and Niyama. These are the fundamental ethical rules, the do's and don'ts that build a person's character. So the yamas are the 5 restraints, or the things a yogi tries to avoid doing. You've got nonviolence, and that means in thought, word, and action. Then truthfulness, non-stealing, self-restraint, or moderation, and finally, non-hoarding, or non-possessiveness. And the power of these principles is supposed to be, transformative. There's the story of the sage Shankara, who set up his monastery at a spot where he saw a pregnant frog being shaded from the sun by a cobra. The idea is, where perfect nonviolence, ahimsa, is practiced, even ancient enemies who are programmed to hate each other can find peace. And what about truthfulness, or satya? The definition is so profound.
It's the perfect alignment between what you think, what you say, and what you do. When those three things are in a perfectly straight line, you are living in truth. The moment they split apart, you're living in falsehood. It's that simple and that challenging.
Next up are the niyamas. These are the 5 observances, the things you should do. They include purity of your body and your mind, being content with what you have, discipline, self-study of sacred texts and of your own inner self, and finally, surrender to a higher power or a universal intelligence. Now, you might be thinking, okay, this all sounds very personal, very individual. But the ancient sages who developed yoga, they saw a direct line connecting an individual's inner state to the health of the entire nation. And the logic is actually pretty simple, but really powerful. A nation is just a bunch of individuals. So if you can transform those individuals, making them more peaceful, more truthful, more content, then the society they create will naturally become more harmonious, trustworthy, and prosperous.
Just look at this table. It shows the direct link. Take santosha, or contentment. When one person learns to be satisfied with what they earn honestly, what's the societal result? A huge drop in greed and corruption. Or when individuals practice satya, truthfulness, you get a high-trust society. Personal transformation is literally the engine of social progress.
So, yeah, yoga is so much more than a pose. It's this vast, profound path that begins not on a mat, but inside your character. It's a blueprint for building a better self, and through that, a better world. Which leads us to one final question. And this one isn't for me to answer, it's for you to think about. What could be the very first step of true yoga in your own life?